Hey everyone, this is Brian from the Tennis IQ podcast. Josh and I hope that you are enjoying the content and discussions that we put out week after week. If you'd like to support the podcast and help us to continue to produce quality episodes, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/tennisiqpodcast/membership. Currently, we have 3 tiers of support: the fan level at $3 per month, the supporter level at $7 per month, and the champion level at $20 per month. Benefits of joining the Tennis IQ podcast community include episode transcripts, participation in book club discussions, and access to monthly masterclasses with me and Josh. For more on these benefits of support, head on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/tennisiqpodcast/membership. Thank you so much. And now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Tennis IQ podcast. I'm Josh Berger.
And I'm Brian Lomax. And today, Josh and I are going to address a recent question from a listener, Trainer Canny. Trainer actually happens to be a Boston College graduate, so I live very close to Boston College, so that's kind of cool. And Trainer actually has kind of two questions, so we're going to split this episode into answering both of them. But here's what he had to say. 2 recent challenges I have faced are how to play against weaker opponents, and even more challenging, how to play with a partner that is weaker than you, and when to know when to take over and when to work together. So we're going to talk how to handle the challenge of playing some weaker opponents. And it was a little unclear if that's singles or doubles, but I think our answer, Josh, is probably going to be about the same. For that. And then to get more into some of the dynamics of playing with someone, who is not as strong or as experienced as you on the doubles court. So let's start with the weaker opponent scenario. And love to hear your thoughts, Josh, on some advice for when playing the weaker opponent, maybe some of the pitfalls of that and how we overcome those.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of some of the pitfalls, we see whether it's at the pro level, the adult league level, the junior level, college, really anywhere, we see upsets happen. And generally there's different dynamics at play. Maybe it's a lower ranked player or the less favored player who ends up playing really well and ends up surprising the higher ranked player. But it often also has to do with the higher ranked player who somehow falls to the other player's level in some way. And that can happen for different reasons. That can happen when maybe there's certain expectations, right? The let's say the favored player expects that it should be easy, expects that they maybe don't have to work as hard, maybe takes certain shortcuts, maybe gets frustrated because they think that they should have won the match already and they're still out there. So I think a lot of these things can happen. And I would imagine as I'm going through them, they may sound familiar in certain ways, because I think probably everybody's been there. Everyone who's played, over a critical mass of matches has probably been on both sides of it in some way or another, frankly. But in terms of maybe certain guidelines as a starting point, I think trying to focus on yourself can be a great place to start. Focus on your process, focus on your game, focus on trying to bring out good tennis, just as sort of a basic starting point. Because it's really easy, and rather than focusing on your game and sort of focusing on your standards and having high standards for yourself in different aspects of your game, it's easy to focus on expectations, because oftentimes in those situations, those expectations are going to involve winning or going to involve this should be easy or things like that. So instead, and we've talked about this concept of focusing more on standards than expectations in the past. But I think especially in moments like this, it really is key, because those expectations tend to do a couple things. They tend to put pressure on us. They tend to distract us from instead of focusing on our game and our opponent's game to focus on the result, which doesn't tend to help as much. So yeah, as sort of a starting point, I think we want to focus on ourself. And I think we also want to make sure that we're not taking shortcuts. Very easy to take shortcuts in terms of maybe footwork and say, oh, I don't need to move my feet the way I usually do here. Or my strategy. I don't need to be as strategic or as thoughtful or careful with the shots that I'm going for. Or maybe my communication, whether that's communication with a partner in doubles or even communication with myself, or maybe let's say a routine. So rather than doing all of these things right and really having high standards for yourself in each of these areas, easy to be a little bit lazy, take some shortcuts because frankly, we don't think that we need to. We think, oh, I don't need to do all of those things because I should be able to win this easily. And as we've seen, that often isn't the case, and that's when upsets can certainly happen. So those are a couple of starting points. Curious what direction you wanted to take this in.
Yeah, I think to build off some of what you said, the expectations creating more of a result orientation for us. And if we think about a very natural human cognitive bias, loss aversion, it can lead us to thinking a little bit more about what we have to lose in this situation, or what might other people think if I don't perform well or if I lose this match. And, as we have said in the past, result orientation or these types of expectations are things that are not fully in our control. And so it does take the focus off of what we're doing. So I think that's an interesting part of this. One thing that maybe to help to illustrate it a little bit more, let's put some numbers to this, Josh. So let's say we don't know how good Trainer is, but let's say he's a 7 UTR and his opponent is a 6. And about a point, should Trainer win that match? Yeah, probably, although it could be close. So like when I think of UTR, I think about a player's range of performance, meaning that if you're a 7 UTR, your range of performance is probably on average plus or minus 0.5. So you could play as well on a given day up to maybe a 7.5. And maybe your lowest level typically is a 6.5. Now, if you're playing a 6, that player's capability is a 6.5. And their lowest level is a 5.5. So in that, you mentioned that dynamic, Josh, of, all right, the lower player, the less experienced player plays really well that day, and the other player doesn't play so well. Look, hey, we got a crossover, 6.5.
Yep.
Now we have an even match. Now, there are some theories of performance that try to explain concepts like arousal and intensity and performance, right? They show the relationship of those couple of things. And generally the curve of that, just in general, is like a bell curve, right? It's called the Yerkes-Dodson model. But that is a very simplistic view. So when we start to add in maybe some individualized characteristics of a player, but also start adding in things more like anxiety, fear, worry, self-belief, and confidence, we start to see different shapes of the model. And one of the things I wanted to bring up today is that there are some theories of what we call catastrophic performance here, where maybe 6.5 actually isn't the floor of your level. Based on what could be going on, it could be actually much lower. And so it's important, I think, I'm trying not to make it worse here for players, but it's important to consider that if you're not careful, you could make this an even match, if not potentially worse than that. So I like what you're saying, Josh, about, how do we address this, which is really focusing more on yourself. Even coming back to our recent episode on trust and commitment to a game plan. Because when we play someone who is a bit lower, you may not respect them enough to the point that you even focus on a game plan. You just kind of just go into the match assuming you're going to win, and that's it. And that can lead to lower performance. So want to make sure that we are respecting the opponent to the point where we have a game plan, using our strengths, exploiting the weaknesses, committing to that. And then I guess lastly, Josh, if like the gap is really big between the two players and there's almost like no way you're going to lose. Well, let's look at it from another perspective. We want you to go out onto the court still getting something from this experience. Because winning the match is not really as important as learning something and building your game. So, if the challenge isn't there and you're going to be basically bored and you could just win so easily, then I think we want to ask a player to give themselves a challenge. Or if this is a team, let's put it in doubles. Like, I think you said this before we began to record. All right, let's commit to serving and volleying on both first and second serves. Why? Well, that's something that we could probably improve in our game, and it may actually help us later in league play or later in this tournament or whatever it is. And now it keeps us engaged as well. So if we bring it back to, say, flow theory, where to be in flow, there has to be kind of a match of skills, your skills, and the challenge presented. So if the challenge is super low, you're going to be bored. If the challenge is super high, generally creates anxiety around that. And so we want to try to manufacture a challenge here that keeps us engaged and playing well. And it's not so much about winning. It's about, hey, can I or can we develop ourselves through this match, even though the opponent isn't quite as strong to give us that natural challenge that a stronger opponent would.
I think that's a great point and a great suggestion, because I think what can happen when we generate that challenge for ourselves is, number one, I think it can actually help. It can help us in the moment. It can help us in that match, but I think it can help us long term. Where let's say that same doubles team we were talking about are maybe more natural singles players, or maybe more they feel more comfortable from the baseline. So getting them to come into net, yes, it may cause them to finish points a little bit earlier because they're at the net, they're putting pressure on their opponents. But I think it also helps them develop that aspect of their game that maybe they don't feel as comfortable with, or that doesn't come as naturally. I think another thing we want to make sure that we do against weaker opponents is we want to make sure that we are putting want to make sure that we're putting pressure on them. Easy to, maybe go into matches against weaker opponents feeling like, I don't need to be as strategic. I don't need to think about their weaknesses and strengths and what specific patterns are going to work against them. I can kind of get by on anything. I can get by on, playing my game, and that should be good enough. But I think when we are playing people like that, we want to really be able to put a lot of pressure on them and really attack those weaknesses or vulnerabilities, which again is good practice for the future. So it's not just for the match itself, it's also for the future. But I think that's one way of, I don't want to say ensuring, because it definitely doesn't ensure or guarantee anything, but it's going to make it a lot harder for your opponent to potentially, to upset you, right? If they're forced to hit their weaker shot over and over again, and they really feel attacked on that, with that particular shot or that particular playing style. So I think that's definitely something we want to do, because I think if we, we want to avoid letting them get too comfortable. And generally, if we can focus on them, really having to beat you with their weaknesses, it's going to be tough for the vast majority of people to get into that comfortable state and start to settle in and maybe make something happen.
And I think if we're imposing our game on the opponent, then we'll play more efficient tennis. We'll probably be off the court faster anyway, like in general, right? You could still be out there a while, but when you go out there without that sort of approach, it tends to take a lot longer. This is sort of a similar story, but I remember this was maybe like 30 years ago. I was playing on an indoor tennis team in what's called the Central Mass League. And so one of our teammates, clearly not respecting his opponent, says, I'll see you guys in like 20 minutes. Thinking, all right, this is going to be easy. So, and these matches are timed. They're only 90 minutes. So an hour and a half later, he comes off the court having won on games, on a game count. He didn't even win two sets. Wow. And so it was like, dude, I think maybe you shouldn't have said, I'll see you in 20 minutes. That may have even just put some pressure on you. And now look what happened. Just assumed you would win. You probably didn't have a real game plan about what you were going to do. And now you're in a dogfight and you barely win the match after 90 minutes. So that's just maybe a story of what could happen when you don't do some of the things that you're suggesting, Josh. So, or we're both in a way suggesting. So I think that is a big thing also to bring. Maybe we didn't bring that up enough, but I think the respect for the opponent is still necessary, meaning that it takes a lot of guts to put yourself on the line. It takes a lot of guts to go out there and maybe know you're going to lose and still show up. So, we want to honor that in a way by showing our best effort and not goofing around or not saying things like, I'll see you in 20 minutes. This person, they're basically just like us. Maybe we were that person 2 years ago, 5 years ago, or whatever. They're growing in their game. And maybe we've been on the other side of being disrespected. Let's make sure that we're not passing that along. So because it's going to make us better in that regard. And I think maybe some of that's going to translate into my answer for the weaker partner piece as well. Do you think we're ready to switch to that topic, Josh?
I think maybe the last thing that I would add about the first question about playing, weaker opponents is, can we view it as an opportunity? Can we view it as an opportunity to help us get better, right? We want to be the type of player that can beat anybody and that doesn't struggle against maybe certain types of players or certain levels of players. The amount of times that I think Brian and I, and probably many of you, have heard, oh, I don't play well against pushers, or I struggle against lefties. I always play badly against lefties, or, fill in the blank. But I always have a tough time against this type of player. I think if our goal is being the best tennis player that we can be, that means being able to successfully compete against whoever happens to be in front of us. And as I think we all know, some of the most challenging people to compete against are people where maybe we feel like we should be beating them easily, because I think for most people, that doesn't tend to bring out their best game. I think for a lot of people, I think probably for the majority of people, they tend to rise to the occasion when they're playing a strong opponent. They tend to rise to that occasion. They tend to let their level drop against weaker players. So instead of saying, oh, I have to play this person, or, okay, this should be easy, let's just get this over with. If we can really embrace it and really say, okay, yes, maybe this might be annoying or frustrating, or maybe I wouldn't have necessarily always chosen it, if I really want to get as much out of this match as possible, because guess what? I'll have other matches like this in the future. And the better that I handle this, the better I set myself up for future situations against other sorts of opponents like this. So, so that's what I would say. If we can embrace it, if we can, come back to that philosophy of everything is practice, which it truly is. This is practice for other situations like this in the future. Then I think we can, then I think it sets us up with the type of mindset to be able to apply some of these specific tools, like, trying to find challenges, or, being able to attack weaknesses and vulnerabilities, or focusing more on our standards than on our expectations. But I think it starts from this place of being able to accept and embrace the situation from the start and sort of being able to view it as practice for the future as well.
Okay. So if you're a doubles player, the scenario of having a weaker partner is probably also something you need practice at. So let's transition to that because it's something that probably everybody listening to this episode has been on both sides of. And I think that we want to emphasize that here as well is that there have probably been times where you've been the stronger player, and there have probably been times where you have been the weaker player. And where I wanted to start with this, Josh, is just maybe explaining a little bit about team formation and a model for team formation and somewhat the unrealistic expectations of doing this to tennis players because it's very frequent that we basically just take two people who've never played together and put them together. And now all of a sudden we expect performance. So it doesn't always work out so well as everyone knows, right? So this is the model I'm going to present is very, very simple, kind of group dynamic model. It doesn't necessarily explain a lot of things that could go wrong or the way we might move from stage to stage, et cetera. But it's a good one just to understand. So the model has four stages. They are forming, storming, norming, and then performing. So the forming stage is, let's say Josh, you and I, we'll just make ourselves a doubles team. Hey, we just meet. How are you? We're pretty much on our best behavior at the beginning and so forth. But then there comes a point where we begin to reveal like what we really like to do, who we really are, and that may bring up some conflict there. Maybe I like to talk every point and Josh doesn't, or vice versa. Or there are different things, or maybe we both want to play the ad side. So there might be some conflict there that we have to get through. That's the storming phase. And once we start to get through that, then we come to the norming phase, which is where we begin to understand some of the rules of engagement for our team, how we want to operate, what kinds of game plans do we want to have, and begin to practice those and really is kind of creating some norms or some rules for how we go. And then the last stage is, we actually begin to perform as a team. We're more cohesive. We have more of a commitment to each other. There's good chemistry there. And of course, if we look at the dynamics of this, teams could obviously revert back to a storming phase where there's some conflict again, and then we have to go through that. But if we're looking at like larger teams, hockey teams, soccer teams, ones in which there's very, very much a lot of interaction between the teammates, this process doesn't take a couple of minutes. It can take days, weeks, maybe even months to go through. And like I said, you could have regressions back to previous stages. But as tennis players, if we just met, in some ways there's like an expectation that you're going to go from just meeting to performing in a matter of minutes. So I bring up the model just to kind of show like some of the challenges of that and to try to help everyone do the best they can from getting to meet someone to a performance place. And so a lot of that is in communication. It's understanding what you each like. What are the rules of partnership on the court, etc. So I just want to stop there, Josh, to see if you have any thoughts about the challenge of putting players together. And we haven't even gotten to the dynamics of whether one player is better than the other. This goes for whether you're same level or not.
Yeah, I would agree about the unique challenge that we think about a team sport and they have weeks, months to build their team, to trust each other, to collaborate, to understand each other. And for let's say a USTA league or a tournament or whatever it may be, you may have just minutes. So it's, you have to go through these stages quickly. And I think, yeah, being able to understand them, being able to, yeah, just identify what stage you're in, I think is really key, to be able to maximize that opportunity out there in front of you in terms of, okay, we have The two of us want to try to play our best, right? And give ourselves the best chance to win. That's sort of our shared goal here. And how can we sort of go through these stages as quickly as we can so that we're a cohesive team and ready to compete.
Yeah. So let's say you now paired with somebody who is, weaker than you to an extent. And, so what's your reaction to that? Is it, uh-oh, I'm going to have to do this, or, oh, this player makes so many mistakes and so forth, right? So you're really kind of stuck in that storming area of it, not able to maybe get through that particular scenario. And so I think, to me, one of the things I would recommend is if you are the stronger player, you have to be the better person out here because you know more. You got more experience. In some ways, you're the captain of the team. And remember that this is a team sport. That can be hard for tennis players. We're not all that good at that, even though doubles is a team sport. So can you think more about the team, the we, than your own ego, the me? And again, remember that there's probably been a time where you were the weaker partner. How did that feel? Were you maybe you had a great, stronger partner who was great to you, but you probably also had a stronger partner who wasn't. I've felt that. I remember playing a match some years ago and definitely being the weaker partner, and the other guy, essentially rolling his eyes when I would make a mistake. That did not help me to play better. It made it worse. And I didn't, address it. I didn't think I was in a position to do that, or my body chemistry was corrupted to the point where I wasn't willing to do that. I didn't have the confidence to do that. But on the flip side, he's actually helping me to play worse. Now, is that what we want to do when we are the better player? I don't think so. So when I say, be the better person, there are certain character skills that are outside of tennis in a way, or outside of tennis skills, but I think are important skills that we can practice via tennis. So one is, number one, kind of having compassion and empathy for your partner because you've been in their shoes. You know what that feels like, and you want this to be a good experience. I think, secondly, can we be very patient with our partner? Understand, hey, they're not as experienced as we are. They're probably nervous. They're probably going to make some mistakes. So when they do, can I express some patience and confidence in them? Maybe that also comes with some respect as well, encouragement. Being the better player, we probably also have to be the leader in some regards. Maybe the captain of the team, quarterback of the team, however you want to phrase it. You're probably going to be the one really helping to form the game plan. I think you're going to be the one who tries to understand what your partner can and cannot do and put them in positions of being able to do things that they're capable of doing so that, they can feel some success on the court. And then what your job is, right? So it could be, your partner, I just need you to, get your return cross court, hit lobs, keep the ball in play. I will be the one who kind of roams around, is aggressive, and puts balls away. You don't need to worry about putting balls away. You just need to hit cross court. That might be something that your partner can do. And then you can be working on what you need to do if that's, what you're capable of. So I think a lot of it does come down to us as the stronger player, taking on the challenge of being the better person, being the leader, and helping to make the experience positive for everyone, and not trying to get so wrapped up in, they're going to make mistakes, etc. It's not so much about the win. It's about the experience. And like you were saying in the last one, Josh, we want to leave the court having gotten better today. And maybe if that's just, I got better as a human being, that's a real positive too.
Yeah, I think you bring up a lot of really important points here. I think, yeah, this, this idea of controlling the controllables, or controlling what you can, right? If you're the stronger player of the two, there are going to be some clear factors out of your control. Like, I mean, anytime you play doubles, you can't control what your partner is doing exactly. Can you, is there a lot that you can do to help them? Yes, absolutely. And I think you bring up a lot of important guidelines around that in terms of respect and encouragement and acceptance. So I think all of that is really key. Um, I think that, but I think just being able to acknowledge that there are going to be things out of your control. Your opponent will miss shots. Your opponent is at the level that they are. Um, you may not be, because of that, your chances of winning may be lower in certain ways. So if we can accept those things, and if we can focus, instead of focusing on those things that we can't control, and maybe the frustrations that could come from that, focusing on what we can. And again, that might include the communication piece, that might include the strategic piece, that might include, how we're gonna make sure that we try to talk between just about every single point, right? And try to really get on the same page, really encourage each other. I think part of it is, letting your partner know that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to miss. It's okay to take chances. You're going to miss shots as well. Even if you're the stronger player, you're going to make mistakes as well. So encouraging them to be willing to go for it, to be willing to take chances, willing to make mistakes even, because it's going to happen. And the difference between your partner feeling comfortable and loose in some way compared to feeling tight and uncomfortable, can't be overstated, right? It often is the difference between how well they're gonna end up playing that day, and then in turn what your chances are gonna be. So I think you increase your team's chances by making by helping your partner feel comfortable. Um, I think there's also maybe the last thing I want to add here is that I think it can be a little bit of a balancing act, where I've seen situations where a stronger player is so focused on their partner and so focused on trying to help them, and maybe giving encouragement, or maybe even going a little bit overboard, and you sort of coaching them rather than them being partners in the ordeal. Um, that they stop focusing on themselves, right? The stronger player also has an opportunity to really, to maybe be the dominant player on the team, and maybe make things happen, and maybe, hit winners or force errors or things like that. And if they're so focused on their partner who's weaker, it's possible they may sort of stray away from focusing on their own game. And, and when that tends to happen, their level can drop, their strengths can sort of uh lower, their strengths can be less significant in those moments because they're not focusing on making it happen. Let's say that stronger player has a really strong forehand and like to, rip forehand returns, and uh you know put a lot of pressure on the opponents up at the net. If they're so focused on, if that player is so focused on their opponent, they may not be focusing on, okay, how can I get myself into position to hit forehands whenever possible. So I think it is sort of that balancing act between trying to help your partner and also focusing on yourself, and and then also just thinking about, how can we, okay, maybe part of that conversation that takes place before a match is, and things related to this. Maybe if there's really a level gap, maybe the stronger player wants to take more of the balls in the middle of the court. Maybe the stronger player wants to serve first. Maybe maybe you make certain adjustments, with your strategy that are based on that, right? It's not a matter of, um, yeah, it's a matter of, okay, how can we best maximize our chances to win with these factors, right? If we're just being honest about things. So I think there's different things at play. It's how can we make our opponent, or sorry, how can we make our partner feel comfortable? How can we sort of find that balance between the focus on them and the focus on ourselves? And then, yeah, strategically, what do we need to do to, with all that taken into consideration, what do we need to do to give ourselves the best chance to win ultimately?
So you used a word that triggered a thought with me. You used the word coaching. Now, this is, in my opinion, problematic when one partner begins coaching the other. I think there's a
Yep.
fine line between coaching and getting us focused on our game plan, planning. And a lot of it comes down into the language that we use. And if we go back to we versus me, or even we versus you, it has to be the communication between points has to remain around, first person plural. We, us, our, all those things. It can't be Josh, you need to do this. You need to get your return in. That when we start coaching our partners, we've now begun actually to make it more about ourselves. We've made it more about how this result is going to affect how I feel about myself and my game and whatever else is happening here. You've lost focus on what the actual mission is, which is for the two of us to come together as a team and see how good we can perform. So, yeah, there could be a fine line between coaching your partner and encouraging your partner and forming a plan. I think the idea to do this well is to continue to say, hey, this is what we need to do. This is what, we want to do on this next point. Not about saying, hey, you did that wrong. You need to do this better. Even going technical, whatever. You may think that you're being a good partner by coaching, but you're not. You're changing the relationship. The relationship still needs to be teammate, partner, and that we're in this together. As soon as you start coaching, you've created a different relationship. You've placed yourself higher, and now you're telling your partner what to do. Maybe with some people that works okay. But in general, it's not necessarily well received, and it's not necessarily the right way to communicate in a match in which you're trying to perform well. So when you brought that word up, Josh, that just sort of triggered something for me because I've had conversations with different teams about this very specific concept. And lots of people who are in the position of being the stronger player feel like they need to coach. And I would disagree with that. I really think you need to be a captain and a leader, but that doesn't mean you're coaching. That means you're keeping both of you focused on what you need to do, what your specific jobs are. So I think you were kind of going there. I just wanted to extend that thought a little bit more.
Yeah, and I would absolutely agree. And I think once a player crosses that line into coaching, it tends to be counterproductive because then the other player tends to maybe not feel so comfortable or feel lesser than or
Yeah.
feel
Or
maybe afraid to
criticized. Yeah.
exactly criticized, and then they end up not wanting to make mistakes, feeling tight, and yeah, and probably not playing well. So I think it's and that's obviously not all about that. It's not all about playing well and winning. It's also about, how do you want to conduct yourself on the court, right? This is not a coach and student relationship. It's a partnership. And if it becomes all about, I know better than you, that doesn't tend to convey that message of trust and respect that we're trying to convey in a situation like this. And again, even just remind, I think it is important for players when they are in that situation, they are the, maybe the stronger of the two, to recognize that they've probably also been in that same situation on the other side, right? They've also probably been the weaker player at times, and trying to think about, how have you felt with other people's behavior? Maybe you've had partners that have really tried to make you feel comfortable and confident in your abilities. And I think the last thing I'll say is that, sometimes there is that perceived difference in terms of, okay, I'm playing with a partner who I think is weaker, but that person could play great on that particular day. That person could be more of a doubles player rather than a singles player, and doubles may really suit their game well. You may have an off day. So just like we talked about with the first question, how the level a tennis player's level is not static. It really is dynamic. It's sort of ever changing, sort of point by point, day by day. It's not like, okay, this person is a 7 and this person is a 7 UTR and this person is a 6 UTR, and that means that every point they're going to play at this level, and every point the other player is going to play 1 point below them. We all know that's not the case. We all know that people play better on certain days and certain points, and let's not make assumptions. Let's not make assumptions. Let's not say that this is how something should be or is supposed to be, or whatever. Just like we wouldn't want to do that in a single setting. Instead, let's be open to the fact that our opponent, or sorry, I keep saying our opponent, our partner could end up surprising us, could end up playing really well, could end up even potentially playing better than us on that particular day. So making sure that we're not going in with too many assumptions, I think, is really, really key as well about what they can and can't do.
Agreed. So really good discussion, Josh, and we want to thank Trainer for sending in that question. If you have questions that you would like us to answer, on as part of an episode topic, please send them in. We would welcome that. We're always looking for great episode ideas, and again, thanks to Trainer for providing us with this 2-part discussion on opponents and partners and how to handle these situations. So that is our show for today. Thank you for listening. For more on today's episode, please check out the show notes. As I said, if you have any feedback or questions for us, you can email us at tennisiqpodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the content that Josh and I discuss on the show, please rate and review the podcast so other tennis enthusiasts can find it more easily. Additionally, to be notified of new episodes, please subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice, including YouTube. And you can also check us out on Instagram. If you would like to support the podcast, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/tennisiqpodcast/membership, where you can learn about the benefits of being part of the Tennis IQ podcast community. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon in our next episode.